So you've recently decided you want to start playing World of Warcraft. Congratulations. From there, you actually realize, oh, there's two versions of this game. There is the classic version, and then there's Dragonflight, or the retail edition of the game. And of course, you want to look into and figure out which version of this game is going to be right for you, which you're going to enjoy more as a player. So you figure, I might as well look it up on the forums. I'm sure they're going to be super helpful. You get into the forums and realize you've entered into a dumpster fire, and that nothing you find here is actually useful at all. I'm sure you'll quickly learn this, but people are super opinionated on classic versus retail, and they get a little too into it sometimes. So I figured, hey, maybe I can help some people make this decision. I mean, I've been playing this game for 15 years or some ungodly amount of time, so might as well put that knowledge to use, right? So yes, I'm doing this for you. Very noble. I know. So today, World of Warcraft Classic, WoW Dragonflight. Which one is right for you? Which should you play? And hold on. Disclaimer, you can play both. It doesn't matter. You can play both. I play both. I enjoy both. I mainly play retail, but I love going back to classic all the time, but you can play whatever you want. I don't care. So let's start with WoW Classic. The name tells you a lot about the game. It is a classic. This is pretty much World of Warcraft as it came out in 2004. I mean, with some minor changes that were implemented over the time, but this is well before the first expansion came out. If you like those old school, kind of more hardcore, no frills MMO games, then this is probably the one for you. A lot of the modern conveniences of like a ton of fast travel and group finders and just things like that that modern MMOs have not been implemented yet. This is well before that time. And right out of the gate, the biggest thing that I think is just kind of cliche at this point, people talk about the difference between classic and retail, is classic is much more about the journey. It's not a mad dash to the end to get to the end game content and grind that out and increase power levels. It's more about getting to the end point in the first place. Classic is certainly a slower experience where it's much more like you're living in this new world and like getting immersed in this shit, you know? You live here now. If you play classic, this is where you live. This is your new home. Say goodbye to the real world. Like, this is your home now. And why do I say it like that? Well, because if you're new or even somewhat inexperienced with classic, you're probably looking at about 10 days worth of game time played before you're getting anywhere near max level. And no, not like 10 days playing for like an hour or two. I'm talking 24 hours times 10. Now, if that sounds daunting, it's because it is. And that's maybe. If you're new, I mean, it probably will take you longer than that. And that's not a bad thing. As I mentioned, with classic gameplay, it's much more heavily focused on the journey getting to the end game, rather than focusing on that end game content. So you don't want this leveling experience to fly by. You want it to take its sweet time, because this is the best part, in my opinion, of classic, is leveling up, getting lost in the world, feeling like a local hero sometimes, just trying to help people out. Which is also another big difference between, classic and Dragonflight, is the fact that in Dragonflight and retail, you're much more like the savior of the universe, like a demigod basically, versus in classic, you're just kind of there. You're just kind of like a warrior going around helping people or clearing out animals, doing random shit to help people throughout the world. It's much more of that simple, old school, kind of wholesome RPG feel. You're in classic for the long game, the long haul, going off on adventures, meeting new people, making groups, killing baddies.
But I wanted to do hood rat stuff with my friends.
Doing all the things that kind of an adventure would do in an RPG element. I mean, it's going to take you a long time to even figure out how the hell this game works, so don't rush it. The beginning and the starting part of World of Warcraft and learning everything is such a great time. Go out and just explore the world. Do things that you normally might consider wasting time. Just go explore, see who's out there, talk with people. That's what this game is all about. And you might notice me repeating the RPG part of this MMORPG. And that's because it's much more focused on those older, more tried and true, stereotypical RPG tropes that really make it special and make certain classes unique. The retail version of the game Dragonflight has really homogenized classes quite a bit, to the point where everyone can kind of do everything. And while that's nice because classes don't really have any shortcomings, it also kind of means you aren't unique or special in any way. Classes just kind of are there. But in classic, warriors sure as hell aren't healing, rogues aren't doing any AoE, and druids kind of can't do anything. Druid main, by the way, don't hate. Like in classic, you need someone who's going to be melee and does extremely good single target damage. Call up a rogue. You need someone who's just a master blaster for AoE. You call up a mage, maybe a warlock. You want someone who's just going to bring tons of utility and buffs and heals. I mean, you're looking at a paladin. And this is a subjective preference, but some people are going to really love having a class identity versus others are going to want to be able to play a class and not be handicapped in any way. WoW Classic is just so simple, but insanely expansive. And I think that's just like the best way to put it. I mean, there's so much in this game. It's by no means complex, but there's just a ton, where if you're not actively looking for it, you're not going to find it. It's much more of a sandboxy experience, I guess, where you kind of just forge your own path. There's no guidance. You really kind of go out there, do what you want, do what quests, explore what areas, do what content you want. If you want to find cool shit in WoW Classic, you got to go find it. Nothing is really spoon-fed to you. I've been playing this game for so long, and it feels like every time I get into WoW Classic, I'm just discovering something I've never seen before, and that feels crazy after this long. The progression being so much slower, but honestly feeling so much more rewarding, it's kind of a hard thing to describe, but it's really good. And revisiting the fact of me saying this is a simple game, it's a game where you can kind of just be dropped in, get lost, and still be okay. It's more of a game where you feel like you're supposed to suck at the beginning and slowly figure it out, and I think that's kind of the best experience for new players. Not only that, generally the WoW Classic community is pretty helpful. You know, talking about how there's more organic interaction because there's not like group finder and things, that's really true. So you're probably gonna find yourself leveling up and grouping up with more people than you would playing like retail Dragonflight. And with most of these people accepting that this is just a slower pace, kind of more relaxed game, more people are willing to take the time to just help you out a little bit. Not saying that's always the case. You're gonna run into some assholes, just is what it is. But in general, there are actually a lot of helpful people on Classic, and I can really appreciate that. And while the game is an absolute classic, no pun intended, and really just a staple in the MMO game community, it's not for everyone. So let's get into why that really is and why retail might be a better option for you as a player. And first things first, just get this out of the way. Classic is nothing to write home about when it comes to graphics. Whereas on the other hand, Dragonflight is really a phenomenal looking and polished game. I have played and play a lot of MMOs, and honestly, I would say that World of Warcraft probably looks the cleanest to me. It's very clean and sharp looking while being still very color saturated and having its own unique art style and direction that's very charming. Like, I wouldn't hold it against you if you tried to get into Classic and maybe enjoyed the gameplay, but really just couldn't stick around because of the way it looks. Those of us who have played World of Warcraft for a long time and kind of find those, you know, older graphics charming or endearing, that as a new player might just be off-putting. So if graphics are important to you, Dragonflight is gonna seem way more impressive off the bat. I know that's kind of a superficial thing to start off with, but when you first log into a game, what's the first thing you notice? The way it looks, and Classic is probably gonna be off-putting to a lot of new people. But the biggest and most important thing to start with Dragonflight and the retail version of the game is this is what's getting currently updated and added to all the time. A major roadblock for me getting really into Classic is the fact that the game is never gonna move beyond what it is now. And while what it is now might be very good, I just don't like the fact that there's no future progression. Whereas Dragonflight being the live updated version of the game, there's always gonna be new content going forward. So that to me is a problem with Classic and getting heavily invested into it. Some people, it doesn't matter. And this is gonna be different person to person, but if you were kind of someone who wants a game that's gonna be kind of a living entity, which MMOs usually are, that's Dragonflight here. And we can't live off of speculation of things like Classic Plus or whatever. Even if that is a thing, like that would probably be a separate entity from the actual Classic servers we have now, so that's not really relevant. But we could talk about this forever, but the biggest thing here to take away is that Dragonflight is the live, currently being updated and added to version of the game, and Classic just is what it is. It's kind of frozen in time. And with that comes the added benefit of, as I said, new content, but also balance changes and tunings, like always being done. You being able to choose a class that you just kind of like, whether it be for appearance or playstyle, and it being viable no matter what. Like how I mentioned with rogues in Classic not being able to do really any AoE. I mean, they can do cleave, but no AoE. In Dragonflight, they can do AoE and single target and do both very well. I mean, obviously they can't heal and tank. They're a DPS only class, but still, they can do DPS however they want. Not only that, but if you're someone who likes to push high level content and show a lot of skill expression, then Dragonflight is probably where you're gonna wanna be. The rotations are complex, but super satisfying once you actually get them down. And Classic, I mean, if you're a mage, your rotation at endgame is pressing one button. And like, that's not even a joke. Like the rotation is literally one button. So while it is more complex baseline, there are varying levels of complexity that you can choose from. And of course, we can't talk about retail WoW and WoW Dragonflight without mentioning the endgame, because I would say out of all the competition for MMOs, World of Warcraft does it the best. It is just so finely tuned and well created, and there's so much variety in it and different play styles, and it's very challenging. You have the raids at 3 different difficulty levels, from normal, heroic, and mythic, which mythic most people aren't actually doing ever, so you don't really need to worry about that. And mythic plus, which are just ever scaling and increasing in difficulty dungeons. Like, say what you will about retail WoW, it might not be for you, but I feel like you just kind of have to admit their endgame content is clean. It's so good. Like at an objective level, like we're just being objective here. I think it's just very well done. And especially in Dragonflight, I feel like they're finding that kind of happy medium between unique and like overly difficult, because the past few tiers or expansions, I think the raids were a little overtuned, a little too difficult. And it seems like in Dragonflight, they're really finding that happy medium where things are, you know, unique and challenging, but not so difficult, where just after a while you're like, this. I don't do PvP, so don't ask me about it. But beyond all this, I think a huge part of Dragonflight that's really important if you're looking to be a new player of World of Warcraft is this is probably the version of the game that's going to respect your time a little more. And I want to be careful saying that because people can interpret that in different ways. I think a lot of people, especially in the MMO community, are a bit of older gamers with maybe less disposable free time. And if you're someone who really wants to feel like you've accomplished something in maybe the hour you have free every day to play a video game, Dragonflight is probably the one where you're going to feel like, okay, I got something done today, versus in Classic, an hour of playing really doesn't feel like much. With that slower pace of a game like Classic, you're spending more time doing menial things like traveling, just getting around. Whereas Dragonflight, you're just kind of dropping in and out of the content as you wish. So if you only have even, you know, half an hour, you can actually get stuff done, versus half hour in Classic. It's like, why log in sometimes? And guys, time is our most valuable resource. So if this is a restrictive thing for you, then definitely take it in consideration when choosing which one of these games you want to play. And a big reason why you're actually able to get things done so quickly in Dragonflight is because the game has 20 years of development behind it, which is another huge benefit of Dragonflight in the live retail game, is the fact that it's been worked on for almost 20 years now. That's 20 years worth of improvements and fixes and quality of life increases, as well as just content. And arguably, yes, a lot of the content is kind of dead now, but it's still there. And especially for people who like to do things like collections, whether it be mounts or appearances and things like that, World of Warcraft does that for sure better than anyone. The collections tab, when it comes to mounts and clothes and transmogs and stuff, like it's just so clean and well done. So that old content, though it's not current, is still valuable. It's like a 69 Chevelle versus a 2023 Tesla. It's like they're both cool and good in their own ways, but they're just different. I like cars, I don't know. And just as a general selling point of retail right now is it feels like the first time the game has been on like a positive upswing for at least a year now. The retail version of the game has been kind of in a rough spot for the past few expansions, but Dragonflight has really turned that around. It no longer feels like the devs versus the players, with us telling them what we want, them saying, no, you want this, and then us not being happy with the content. They seem to actually be listening, implementing quality of life changes that people want, and just doing a good job overall, which with any live currently being updated game, that's got to be the most important part. But yeah, that's my ramble about the difference between the two games. I mean, hopefully this gave you some insight. The biggest thing, like I said, is one sub gets you both games. So you can always just try them. If one doesn't stick for you and one does, play that one. If you like them both, they're both there available for you. So give them both a try. At the end of the day, you don't know until you try it. They're both great games. They just bring very different things to the table, and I play them both. And like I said, hey, play whatever you want. I don't care. It's your choice. Do what's right for you. But hey, I appreciate you guys tuning in. You might realize if you've seen my videos before, it's a little bit of a different format. Wanted to put myself in the videos, make things a little bit more personal. I would say you could expect videos both like this, as well as, you know, me just covering video game reviews and maybe not being in the video. But either way, appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.